Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Trey Gowdy, and it's Sunday night in America. After Barack Obama won in 2008, so-called experts said the Republican Party was dead. The party needed to moderate, move to the middle, become Democrat-light, and along came a man who didn't do any of that. Donald Trump replaced Barack Obama. So much for the experts. Now Democrats are in the wilderness. They had it all, and then they lost it all. So is there a plan to escape the slough? First, you have to acknowledge what mired you there initially. Was it the message, the messenger, or both? For Republicans, history can be a cautionary tale. Perhaps you do have a mandate, but for what? The political graveyard is littered with those who misjudged or overread what they believe to be a mandate. Joining us are Ben Ferguson, a conservative commentator, and Peter Savodnik from the Free Press. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen. Peter, Kamala Harris lost convincingly to a man with over 100 felony counts, adjudicated or pending, accused of inciting a riot, and the American people said, so what? That's who we want. And the more he was pursued, the more the public seemed to like him. Do the Democrats have an understanding yet of why Donald Trump won?
I don't know, and we're going to find out over the next few years. I think that there are some Democrats who definitely understand, and they're going to be vying for the nomination in 2028. They'll be running for the House and Senate in the midterms in 2026, and some Democrats I think definitely do not get that, and so the party is going to go through the same process that all parties go through. They're going to be kind of sifting this out and battling it out, and we'll see where the consensus arrives.
All right, Ben, one can argue the GOP was given a mandate on border security, deporting criminal aliens, reducing the size and scope of government. But in some ways, that has been overshadowed by debate over due process and branch integrity and tariffs. Is it possible to overread or misread a mandate?
Sure, but I don't think they are here. I think what President Trump has made very clear is I'm going to put America first. That was the mandate. Now, under that mandate was some of the categories that you just mentioned. But look how fast he was able to secure the border. And yes, this administration can do more than one thing at once. I also think this cabinet is much better than his first cabinet. They're all working together in lockstep. They understand each other. They understand how to work together. You bring in Elon Musk and Doge, which people overwhelmingly support. And you have a president that's made it clear that China is a national security threat, and we're going to get Americans back to work. So I look at what the president's doing now, and he understands who his enemies are. He understands how government works. He didn't have that back in 2016. And I think the American people are impressed with what he's delivered in the first 100 days. I also think there's an X factor here, which is the Democratic Party just abandoned the American people and didn't listen to them. Their arrogance as they were pushing for socialism and communism, standing up for MS-13 gang members in the last 2 weeks. In what world is that a good political play to go down there and meet with an MS-13 gang member who's a member of a terrorist organization instead of meeting with the family members who have been victims of MS-13 crimes? So that's how far gone the Democratic Party is right now. It makes it a lot easier for Donald Trump to get done what he needs to get done with a mandate, because you look at the other side and you're like, they're not even noticing I'm alive.
All right, Peter, let's listen to Bernie Sanders, and then I'll ask you about it on the other side.
What Democrats lack right now is a vision for the future. How are we going to provide a decent standard of living for a younger generation, which, everything being equal, will be poorer than their parents? How do we repair a broken healthcare system? How do we raise the minimum wage to a living wage? How do we deal with a corrupt campaign finance system that allows billionaires to control both political parties? Those are some of the issues that need to be discussed.
All right, Peter, there seems to be a generational shift occurring among Democrats. They want new leaders, except Bernie Sanders, was alive when the continent separated, and he hasn't come close to winning the White House. Is he really the ideological leader of the Democrat Party, or is it someone else?
Yeah, no, it's definitely not him. Obviously, AOC is vying for his base. She wants to be the Bernie Bro heir apparent. And we'll see if that happens. there are a lot of people who I think are going to be eating into sort of his constituency. People who I think will make, I think, a very compelling case for that. Someone like an Alyssa Slotkin or a Ro Khanna in California. Arguably a Joe Shapiro, although I think that Josh Shapiro, excuse me, that might be a little bit trickier. But there are a lot of Democrats who are still kind of like figuring out sort of how to stitch together the kind of Bernie contingent with, other Democrats, other constituencies in the party, and also waiting to see how that fits with whatever the president does and how they run against the Republicans. So look, I think that's all very important and very, 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 very fluid right now. But the big, I think, actually, the big unknown quantity here is Donald Trump. There's nobody who actually makes it, who will have, I think, a bigger impact on both the midterms and the 2028 election than Trump, obviously. And I think he's already created a lot of openings for Democrats. We'll see if the Democrats are smart enough to be able to exploit those. Right now, that's very much a question mark, but who knows?
Yeah, no, AOC, and this is where you look at Bernie Sanders and AOC. These are two declared communists or socialists. That is the Democratic Party right now. And yeah, Bernie may say, I want to prop up AOC and I'm going to bridge this gap. But if you want to know what the Democratic Party is, it's dead. It is filled with socialists, communists, and Marxists that have been masquerading as Democrats for the last 10 years. So if this is the Democratic Party, AOC, a declared socialist, then get ready, because Republicans are going to have an amazing 4 more years. And that has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Now, you add Donald Trump in there, and it's going to be, I think, a great 4 years for conservatives, because the Democratic Party is telling you, listen to them when they say this, we are dead, we are now socialists, we are communists.
The great thing about living in the U.S. is there's always another election. We will see what happens in the midterms. We will see whether it is Speaker Mike Johnson or whether it is Speaker Hakeem Jeffries, in which case President Trump's going to be impeached yet again. So that's the great thing about America. We shall see, and we'll have you both back before then to see who's right. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us on this Sunday night.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.